Okay, so first to just give you a little bit of information about myself. I'm in my second year in the business analytics program here at Wake Tech, and I'm hoping to get the associate's degree after the spring semester next year. I do have bachelor's degrees in sociology and anthropology from Emory University, and I got those in 2007. And ever since then, I've been in the analytics field. And currently, I'm a senior data analyst in the Audit and Risk Management Department at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. So just as far as the reasons why I chose to enter this program, I noticed that there was a shift in business more towards using predictive analytics on a more regular basis. And I wanted to make sure that my skills were keeping up with that and that I was staying relevant. So this program has been a really great option for me up to this point. And before I get into the details of my presentation, I want to share a quick personal story. Dr. Shaw actually helped me come up with the topic for my presentation about competition and learning. And I don't know if she knew it at the time, but I'm a very competitive person. When I was younger, I was a competitive swimmer, and my best stroke was the butterfly. And I'm not sure if you all know what that looks like, but you're supposed to move your arms together at the same time, keep your head forward. I didn't do that. My parents used to make fun of me because as I was swimming in my races, they could see me peering to the side and making sure that nobody was coming up next to me. And if they were, then I would start to swim much faster. And oftentimes that resulted in a personal best for me. So that's just an example of how competition can be a motivating force. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about competition. Is competition a good thing? So as I was looking through quotes from about competition, I came across two from some pretty successful business people. The first one is from Walt Disney, and he basically is quoted as saying that he wouldn't have known how to get along without it. And I'm sure a lot of you who may have small children are happy that he didn't have to. But what I think he was getting at when he said this was that competition was a good motivator for him. And then the second quote up here is from Steve Jobs, and this one gets to something else. And in spite of my hatred for Apple products, I really like this quote. He says, "You can't look at the competition and say you're going to do it better. You have to look at the competition and say you're going to do it differently." And I think this gets to a part of competing that plays a pretty important role in analytics, and that is creativity. So as I mentioned, I've been in the analytics field for a little while now, and I never would have said before being in this program that analytics is, a pretty creative endeavor. Most of my creative endeavors before this program were related to, maybe making an interesting graph or chart or reporting related to the analysis that I had done. But as far as the analytical process itself, I wouldn't have said that it was very, creative. And I'll give an example of this later on. And one more quote on a less serious note. If you were wondering if competition is still alive in America, take some advice from Ann Landers. She says, "Anyone who believes the competitive spirit in America is dead has never been in the supermarket when the cashier opens another checkout line." So moving on, what is Kaggle? Kaggle is a website that hosts predictive modeling competitions online. And the data sources and business problems come from various sources. So they come from companies and organizations and researchers who are, really trying to find out a solution to the problems that they're having. So statisticians and analysts go on to Kaggle and compete to come up with the best predictive models. And I do want to mention here that while it's a good platform to compete with others, it's also a great way to compete with yourself and try to do better with each model that you come up with. And I think that's important to mention here in a learning situation because you're not always going to be the best, but there is a sense of accomplishment with every improvement that you make in your models. The other great thing about Kaggle is that it provides realistic learning exercises, and you have to go through all the steps in the modeling process. So the data posted on the Kaggle site, it's not cleaned up for you already. You have to, go through the data, dig deep into it, and clean it up and figure out what exactly you need to do to be able to use it as an input into your modeling process. So, unlike some maybe textbook examples, it's a little bit more realistic, and I think that's a good benefit to us as students to be able to use those examples on the Kaggle site. And I included regrouping up here in the last bullet point because, that happens a lot. I think data modeling is an iterative process, and you have to go back and start over at the beginning a lot of times once you get to the end and review your results. So, it's really an ongoing circular process almost. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to briefly cover 2 of the Kaggle competitions that we touched on for class assignments, and then one that I've chosen to start working on independently. And some of my fellow classmates will go into more details on the methods that they chose for these, so in some of the later presentations. So I'm just going to briefly share some of the important things that I learned from the competitions. This first competition involved predicting survival on the Titanic. And the data contained about 10 predictor variables that we could use, and they were all related to the passengers. So, for example, passenger class and passenger name were 2 of them, and the others are listed up there. And in trying to do well with this competition, I ended up learning a lot of more the mechanical aspects of the modeling process. So, how to examine variables and reduce the number of categories that are used in the variables so that they would be good inputs into the predictive modeling process. How to impute missing values. So if your predictors have empty fields for some of the records, then those are not going to be good inputs into your model in certain situations. So this particular project helped me understand how to impute the missing values and fill those in so that we could get a more complete model at the end. And then also with this one, I learned the mechanics of running decision trees and random forests using R. And the end result, over 5 file submissions, so I came up with 5 different models for this one over the process, and my prediction accuracy improved from about 63% to about 81%. Another exercise we did was to predict grant application outcomes based on a file with around 250 different variables. So this was a tough one because the data set was pretty intimidating at first. So when you open the data file and you see 250 columns in Excel, that can be a little bit daunting. A lot of the variables had closely related information in them, but it was just split out into multiple columns. And then there were several variables with so many categories that it wasn't going to be helpful to use those in the model the way that they were. So this was really an exercise in data reduction and using creativity and kind of thinking outside of the box to figure out how to adjust those variables and code them so that they were going to be good inputs into the modeling process. So by the end of it, I felt like I had something a little bit more manageable and more meaningful. And I also had about 30 pages of code in R from all of that. And I still felt like there was some room for improvement. But in general, I feel like that was a great lesson in, I guess, keeping my cool when faced with a file so big and, something that could have been a little intimidating at first. Next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, I wanted to try another challenge to see what I can learn from it. So I'm taking on the Rossmann Stores Kaggle competition. This one is to predict sales based on store information and historical sales. I'm in the data pre-processing phase right now, but I'm planning to submit some predictions soon, and I'm hoping my competitive spirit will help me move up the leaderboard. Next slide. Thank you. So in conclusion, it's been my experience that competition has been a really good thing to motivate my learning, and Kaggle has been an excellent platform for that.